Welcome to Chapter 13. Today we are talking about opioids. There are legal and illegal opioids. They generally do the same thing. Okay, let's get started here. So, opium. Opium is a naturally occurring substance. It is derived from the poppy plant. FYI, if you have to take a drug test, do not eat things with poppy seeds before taking this drug test. Opium has a 6,000-year history for medicinal use. Opioids are a couple things. So they are either drugs that are derived directly from opium, or they are synthetic drugs with opium-like effects. Synthetic means made in the lab. Okay? The major point of opioids, the major effects are that they relieve pain and suffering. And we say suffering because, as I mentioned before, pain is a subjective sensation. And it's also chronic pain causes depression, it causes hopelessness, it causes suffering. So it relieves pain and its associated suffering. Opioids also deliver pleasure and relief from anxiety. So there are a lot of people that feel like they are happier, live better lives while using opioids. Now, there are a lot of side effects, negative things with opioid addiction. So living a better life is questionable. Avoiding certain feelings that they don't like, yes. I will say this before we move on. I have seen in the past, a long time ago, one of the places I worked, I had several, maybe early 20s clients who used heroin on a regular basis, sometimes right before coming into my office. Okay, so opium cultivation. Opium is collected for only a few days of the plant's life. Opium harvesters make shallow cuts into these unripe seed pods, and this is a picture of unripe seed pods. Now, the resinous substance that comes out of these cuts is then scraped, it's collected. Opium products, so morphine. Morphine is a product from opium. It's extracted from raw opium. Heroin is then derived from morphine. So basically, to make heroin, you make morphine, and then you derive heroin from that. These pods here, like I said, these are these unripe pods. One time, it was many, many years ago, I had a client who was trying to stop using heroin, and she had gotten this idea that she would make opium tea. And so she got these pods mailed to her via the internet, and she brought them into session and showed them to me, which was actually kind of cool. But just to let you know, she tried the tea. It helped some. Heroin is a really difficult drug to stop using. She did not successfully do that with the opium tea, but it did give her a little bit of hope. And also, by the way, it's not legal to buy these things on the internet. I don't need these kinds of things in my office, but for a one-time kind of scenario, it was interesting. Okay. And also, I must say that I have to appreciate that I have clients that trust me so much. Okay, all right. History of opium. So Egypt, 1500 BC. We have this Ebers papyrus described its medical uses. BC. Greece. Opium had an important role in medicine. And then in the Arabic world, opium was used as a social drug. Physicians wrote widely about the use of opium and described opioid addiction. Okay. Europe. In the 16th century, opium became widely used. Physicians developed this preparation called laudanum. And laudanum is a combination of strained opium as well as other ingredients. Now, interestingly, a lot of physicians then started using laudanum, they weren't supposed to, as a recreational drug or a way to feel okay, and became addicted to it. If you watch shows, I think Deadwood was one of those shows, but often they will refer to things as laudanum. Now you know what it is if you didn't before. Okay. Writers, 1821, Thomas de Quincey wrote Confessions of an English Opium Eater. Elizabeth Barrett Browning, Samuel Taylor Coleridge famously used opium. Now, 1729, opium smoking was outlawed in China, but smuggling was huge. British East India Company was involved in the opium trade, legally in India and illegally, but indirectly, in China. Pressure grew. Eventually, war broke out between British and Chinese over opium trade. And I say it like that because this is a drug that has caused, financial incentives, cultural things, and war. Now, morphine. Okay, morphine is the primary active ingredient in opium. Morphine was first isolated in 1806. Now, the name morphium is actually after Morpheus. And Morpheus is the god of dreams. Now, morphine is 10 times as potent as opium because morphine is derived or taken from opium. So morphine is 10 times as potent as opium. Now, codeine. Codeine is something else you might have heard of. Codeine is often in cough syrups and things like that. Codeine is a secondary active alkaloid in opium. It's first isolated in 1832, and the name codeine actually comes from the Greek word poppy head. All right. Now, morphine use spread due to two developments. One, a technological development. So in 1853, the hypodermic syringe, amazing, made huge differences in medical things you could do. Getting these things to people immediately through hypodermic syringe changed the world of surgery, changed a lot of things. So the hypodermic syringe allowed delivery of morphine directly into the blood. Also, political developments. So widespread use during war provided relief from pain as well as relief from just feeling crappy, which is what the word, this word means. Okay. Dysentery. Veterans returned addicted to morphine. It was later referred to as sort of soldier's disease or army disease, and that's morphine addiction. Morphine withdrawals are not fun. But these were things that happened. Now, heroin, okay? So to go back, morphine is derived from opium, which makes morphine much more potent than opium. Heroin is derived from opium and is much more potent than morphine. It is 3 times as potent as morphine. Morphine is 10 times as potent as opium. Hopefully you can follow along there. Now, it's so potent because of its increased lipid solubility. Remember, if something is more lipid soluble, it's easier to cross the blood-brain barrier. Okay, so 1874, 2 acetyl groups were attached to morphine. 1898, the Bayer brand, remember we talked about Bayer in the previous chapter, the Bayer brand marketed heroin, and that became its brand name, heroin, coined by Bayer. Very potent, originally marketed as a non-addictive cough suppressant. Heroin marketed as a non-addictive cough suppressant. It worked. It was a replacement for codeine and morphine. Of course, later linked to intense addiction. All right. 3 types of opioid dependence in the U.S. So oral intake via patent medicines, opium smoking mostly by Chinese laborers, and injection of morphine. Injection of morphine is the most dangerous form of use. The percentage of population addicted to opioids peaked in the 20th century, possibly as high as 1% of the population. Okay, and this is before the Harrison Act. And if you remember, these opioid dens popped up, Chinese laborers were using things, and so there's all that. People started going after them. We talked about this, racism. Okay, now, initially, opioid dependence was not viewed as a major social problem. Opium smoking was limited to certain ethnic groups. Patent medicines were socially acceptable. And opioid addiction was viewed as this sort of vice of middle life. So now you may go out, get a red sports car and a young girlfriend or something like that. But at the time, it was like, well, midlife crisis, we're going to start using some opium. Typical user, 30 to 50 years old, middle class, white woman. Drugs were purchased legally in patent medicines. I mean, if you think now about your typical heroin user, this is not really what you think of. However, that doesn't mean that those people are not using it, just to be clear. Okay. Hold on one second. So after the Harrison Act, okay, enforcement of the 1914 Harrison Act made opioids much more difficult to obtain. You now had to go to illegal dealers. So while before you had your 30 to 50-year-old upper-class white woman getting them from doctors, if you now have to go to illegal dealers, a lot of that crowd is not following. So it really resulted in changes in opioid use patterns. Oral use declined. Primary remaining group of users were those who injected morphine and heroin. Cost and risk of use increased. So the most potent method, IV injection, was favored. And addicts were looked on as criminals rather than victims. Now, there's a lot of problems that come with IV injection. So, after World War II, use of heroin increased very much in low-income areas of large cities. In the 60s and the 70s, heroin use further increased in larger cities. Heroin use was associated with minority populations, low-educated populations. In New York, users were prosecuted under this Rockefeller drug laws. The Rockefeller drug laws were the strictest drug laws in the U.S. Now, heroin in Vietnam, hence the Vietnam War, that stuff, okay, relatively inexpensive. It was pure, which is, I think, something to think about. So pure there, and easy to obtain. About 5% of personnel tested positive for opioids, that went to Vietnam. Due to the purity, most users smoked or sniffed it rather than IV injected it, and most users stopped when they returned to the U.S. Now, this is interesting because there is these ideas that this drug is so addictive, and once you take it once, you can never stop. But this is an example of people that went to another place, smoked or sniffed pure drug, and came back and stopped. So under certain conditions, relatively high percent of individuals may be able to use heroin recreationally. Heroin addiction is not inevitable among occasional users. Now, again, though, if we think about the populations that use heroin, often we have people who are searching for something else, who are unhappy, who have a lot of other issues, and they're injecting it, and it's not pure here. You don't know what you're getting when you buy heroin. You don't know what you're injecting into your veins. That should be scary. So, most of the heroin used in the U.S. is derived from poppies grown in Mexico and Colombia. Interestingly, the purity of heroin has actually increased dramatically in years. So people that have used a long time ago, if they go to use now the same amount, they're actually getting a lot more, which is really dangerous. The mid-1970s, purity was about 5%. Currently, it's about 20 to 40%. Now, very few Americans actually use heroin, about 0.2%. There's always this, oh, there's a new heroin epidemic in Birmingham, or there's people at Mountain Brook High School are using heroin. An epidemic is a questionable statement. And also, when we talk about use of heroin, yes, there are people who are injecting illegal heroin. However, what I tend to see are high school, college students who are using prescription opioid medications that are not prescribed to them. I remember I used to see a young girl who was using heroin and a young girl who was using prescription opioid medications illegally. And the one that was using the prescription medications really looked down on anyone who used heroin because that was ridiculous. Over time, she went from using prescription medications to crushing and chewing those prescription medications to snorting those prescription medications to injecting those prescription medications. Yet still her attitude was one that looked down on those who used heroin. I just found that sort of dynamic interesting. And both individuals were, of college age, actually both doing generally well in college. I don't think either of them completed it, but for people addicted to opioids, not too bad. Okay, now, so let's talk about prescription opioids. Popular prescriptions, we have our hydrocodone, which is Vicodin or Lortab, and then you have your oxycodone, which is going to be Oxycontin, Percocet, things like that. The differences here are not huge between these different things. They are both opioid drugs. Now, in 2012, 2% of Americans 12 and older reported use in the past month. People reported either using it orally, snorting it, injecting it. Dawn data would say that prescription opioids ranked third for ER visit and first for deaths. Most opioid overdoses include or occur in combination with other things like alcohol. Opioid use plus alcohol use equals very bad, very dangerous. Here is just sort of our picture of our different molecules here. You can see the slight differences. Now with our prescription narcotic analgesics, now prescription medications here are drugs here are huge business. They make so much money. A lot of primary care physicians will give these things out. ERs give these things out. Pain clinics give these things out. People love their pain meds. Now we have our natural products, which are morphine and codeine. We have our semi-synthetics, like heroin. And then you have your synthetics, your methadone, your pepridine, your oxycodone, your oxymorphone, your hydrocodone, your hydromorphone, your dihydrocodeine. This one I'm not as familiar with, bupropion, pentazonine, and then fentanyl. Fentanyl is typically given in patch form. People abuse all these things, including like a, a patch that you would then stick onto your body, arm, thigh, whatever it is, and it gives you the medication slowly. It's intended for good purposes, but people will actually take parts of the patches and use them recreationally. Naturally occurring opioid-like transmitters, neurotransmitters. We have our enkephalines, so these are morphine-like neurotransmitters found in the brain and the adrenals. Endorphins. Endorphins is a word that you are more familiar with, right? Endorphins means morphine-like. They're endogenous morphine. Endorphins. Morphine-like neurotransmitters found in the brain and the pituitary gland. Endogenous opioids and opioid drugs are agonists of several types of opioid receptors. Mu, MAO, and kappa are big in pain perception. Delta, we know that it's a part of that, even though the function is not well understood. By the way, you don't have to memorize those things that I said at the very end, since we're not going too into them. All right. Now, then there are drugs that block the action of opioids. So naltrexone is a big one that's used, and this blocks the action of opioids. So why would you use this? You would use it to reverse depressed respiration from opioid overdose. It could help precipitate withdrawal syndrome. It can help prevent dependent individuals from experiencing a high from subsequent opioid use. So people would take it so that they don't actually get a benefit later from using, so then the motivation to use is less, and the less often they use, the less often they want to use. Harm reduction strategies. So several U.S. cities have initiated programs that provide naltrexone to heroin users. It really results in fewer overdose deaths. So beneficial uses of these things. Pain relief. It reduces the emotional response to pain. It diminishes the patient's awareness of and response to the adverse stimuli. Typically drowsiness, but it doesn't induce sleep. Now, it can also be used for treatment of intestinal disorders. So it tends to counteract diarrhea and, of course, then counteracts the resulting dehydration that occurs with diarrhea. It decreases the number of peristaltic contractions. So helps with intestinal disorders. Cough suppressant. Codeine has for a long time been used as an antitussive properties, for its antitussive properties. Here's that dextromorphan, is an over-the-counter, cough suppressant. And we've talked about dextromorphan before. It is an opioid analog, and therefore is one of the reasons why people use this cough syrup as a recreational drug sometimes. You may hear the words like sippin' syrup or purple haze. That's that. That's what it's referring to. Okay. Tolerance. Tolerance develops to most effects. Higher doses are needed to maintain effects. You also see cross-tolerance among the different opioids. Physical dependence. Opioid withdrawal is unpleasant. However, it's rarely life-threatening. Withdrawal symptoms can be prevented with any opioid agonist. Okay, here are your differences here. Approximate hours after previous dose for heroin or morphine versus methadone. So that's why methadone is often used or prescribed to people to help them stop using heroin or morphine. It is less potent and it's less difficult to stop. Do look at this chart before moving on. Okay. Now, there's psychological dependence is huge here. So positive reinforcement. That is, people feel better when they're using the drug. That is, people that feel like they need to use the drug feel better when using the drug. Positive effects reliably follow. You know if you just use, you'll feel better. You start to feel terrible, terrible, terrible after you haven't used. You know the one thing that will make you feel better is using. Your brain starts feeling, bad. Your body starts feeling bad. You start thinking about all the miserable things in your life. Using will help that. Of course, it will make it, then you have to keep using and using and using and using and using. Negative reinforcement. The use of the drug removes those withdrawal symptoms. So I mentioned that. Now, fast-acting injectable opioids are most likely to lead to dependence. I don't think I've mentioned this in this class so far, but maybe I have. I had a client for a while who was using heroin so often that she had, I should go back, when you inject things into your arms, into your veins, eventually your veins kind of quit on you. They stop working well. And then you have to find other veins to use and other veins to use. And eventually you really don't have very many veins left. And this client this was a very long time ago in a different state. This client was so addicted to heroin for so long that she really didn't have veins that would work very well. So she would have to get in a warm bathtub, which would sort of open up veins, and she had to inject in her groin area. To me, that's such a beautiful example of intense addiction. She couldn't really go visit her family because she couldn't stay away from her home for very long. She had to schedule classes so that she could go back home at certain times so that she could get in the bathtub and inject heroin through her groin area. That's intense. That's psychological, physical dependence. Okay. Toxicity. We have our acute toxicity. Opioids depress respiration. Effects with alcohol are additive. Occasionally you'll have nausea and vomiting. These things can be counteracted with naltrexone. Okay. Now that repressed respiration can lead to not breathing. Chronic toxicity is going to be associated with injection. So that is going to be infections, things that are spread through blood-borne diseases. The life of a person addicted to heroin, like I said, there's no vacation. You need at least 3 to 4 injections daily to prevent withdrawal. It can be expensive, drugs, paraphernalia, hanging out with questionable people, health consequences, or not questionable people, but people with questionable intentions maybe. Maybe unsafe. Health concerns, risk of overdose due to variable potency of different batches. Skin infections, blood-borne infections. Now, if we go to, some of you guys have, you wrote your discussions about a celebrity. Some of you wrote about Philip Seymour Hoffman. He died not that long ago after using heroin. And the idea is that you don't know what you're getting. And maybe it was an overdose, or maybe there was stuff in there that he didn't know. There's also a couple years ago just a big outbreak of a bad batch of heroin that a lot of people used. And again, caused a lot of problems for a lot of people. So interestingly, though, a lot of heroin users mature out. So they basically stop using at some point. They just decide they want to go live a real, regular life, not addicted to heroin, where they don't have to go home at regular times to use. Now, misconceptions, though. People have this idea that all of a sudden, this intense pleasure unequaled by any other experience. Well, some people report nausea. Some people are uncomfortable. Tolerance to negative effects does develop compared to euphoric effects. Withdrawal is always excruciating. Well, withdrawal is often similar to the intestinal flu. It's unpleasant. People don't like it. It can be bad, but it's probably not going to kill you. People have this idea that after one injection, you're hooked for life. Well, that's probably not right. Becoming dependent does take time and persistence. So that's generally it. So we did our opioids, we did our legal, we did our illegal, where they all come from. They all come from generally the same thing, and then some are created in labs, some are, derived from the plant. And I guess that's about it. As I always say, I'll see you in the next chapter.